Hey everyone, thanks for stopping by the Peace Garage. Well, I'm at a very difficult spot right now. I want to put the water pump on and I want to put the intake manifold on. But if I do that, I won't be able to paint behind the water pump because it covers up most of the front. If I put the intake manifold on, I won't be able to paint underneath it or in the valley pan because the intake manifold covers most of that up. I could put it on and try and paint behind it, but it just won't look right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint the engine, and then after it's done we'll come back and do the final assembly. Now if you've never painted an engine and you want to know how to paint an engine, I have a video about how to paint your engine. If you click on this little bubble up here in the upper corner, that will take you to the video about painting engines. So I don't need to go through that now. So I'm going to paint this, and when I'm done we'll come back and go through the final assembly. Alright, I'm going to start with my water pump. And you can see the water pump is very huge, so if I put this on and tried to paint behind it, it would be very, very difficult. I won't be able to get this painted, so painting it ahead of time really helps. Now I have my gaskets on here. I had a little bit of right stuff on both sides, so I put some right stuff on the metal, put the gaskets on, and then a little seal around it. And I have these pins in here, and those help just with sitting the water pump in place, and I'm just holding it there while I put the screws in. Now there are many screws in here. Well, there's 8 screws that hold this thing in, and some of them are connected to different brackets for like the alternator and the power steering pump. And since I'm not putting those on right away, I'm just putting in bolts that are just long enough to hold the water pump in place, so I can go ahead and tighten it down and hold it in place. Then when I go to put the other brackets on, I can just take the bolt out and put whatever bolt goes in that place. Now that the housing is installed, I can put my water pump in, or my water pump insert. One thing is the outlet here, the water outlet. This is what I took out of there. It was kind of like, it looks like a reducer with just a piece of pipe, a pipe nipple in there, and that's what was used for the water hose, heater hose. I have to think that's not what came from the factory. So I replaced it with a nice fitting, with a nice barb on it. And when you put your water pump in, or when you put the rotary unit, you're going to make sure the weep hole's got to go towards the bottom. If you put it up towards the top, when it leaks or when it starts to wear out, you wouldn't know it. So you always got to turn it over, make sure that weep hole is on the bottom. And when you see, I got my finger kind of on the bottom here, and when you put it in, I also have some right stuff underneath the gasket and on top of the gasket, and you install it. And the hardware that comes with the pump's got nice copper crush washers on it. So when you hold the weep hole and put it down, all you have to do is line up your holes, and then you can go around and put them all in and torque them down. Alright, now I'm going to assemble this harmonic balancer. And there were some comments that people were worried about me taking this apart because I wouldn't be able to balance it, but this actually goes together only one way. We start with one of these rubber bushings that goes on here, and there are nipples on the back that line up with the holes in the hub. Now this only goes on here one way. If I rotate it the other way, or 180 degrees, it wouldn't fit on. So this only goes on here one way. So you can't make a mistake putting this on. Okay? And I just have some WD-40 on there to make it easier to install. I'm going to pull my bolts all the way up. Now, if you recall, when I put the engine together, I left piston number 1 at top dead center firing. So when I put this harmonic balancer on, and when I put the timing mark on here, number 1 should line up with the timing needle. Okay, so I have here, this is the harmonic balancer, and all I did was I painted it black, and I colored in the timing marks with a yellow, actually the paint stick. Now this also only goes on here one way because these holes, if you look, these holes are not regular. So if I line these up right, this number 1 timing top dead center there should line up right with that timing needle. And I sit it on here. Let's push it on there, make sure it stays on there. And there you go. I'll show you. There we go. Number 1 lines up exactly with the firing for the upper dead center for cylinder number 1. So that's how you know that you have your crankshaft in the right position, the camshaft is in the right position, all the timing is in the right position. Now all I have to do is put the other one on. Just spray a little WD-40 on it. And again, this will only go on here one way. It's really kind of easy to tell. There are a couple screw holes that are closer together. And again, you're going to have the nipples here in the same position. Right now they're like, I guess, I don't know, 4 and 10 o'clock. So I push this on here. And this is what will lock the harmonic balancer in position rotationally this way. See how it fits flush? That fits flush against there. So now the harmonic balancer is mounted on the hub. And if I come in here with my pulley, the pulley also will only go on here one way. And if I line up those bolt holes, let's see here. So I'm going to go one way. Let me make sure I got it right here. Top and bottom. There we go. Okay, see? There. One way. Now I can pull all these bolts out. Pull the bolts out like that. Put my nuts around there and put the center bolt in with my center bolt or my center bolt hub. And I can tighten it down. Okay, before I put my intake manifold on, I want to get my oil filter assembly put together. Now this is kind of interesting the way this works. Since it didn't come with an oil filter, it actually was an option. I'm adding this on here. What I have is this is my oil filter tube, or this is the filler tube where you fill your oil into the engine that comes down here and goes into the block. And then the filter simply screws on this kind of like a adapter here, like that. And then the way this works is kind of interesting. You have to get oil into the bottom of the filter, so you have a line that comes off. You put an elbow in the cylinder head here, and you can see that this would be a pressure line. This pressure line here goes to the center of the oil filter. So I screw this into the center here, and that's how oil goes into the middle of the oil filter. And then the return simply gets hooked up in the back here, like that. And I can tighten these up later on, but that's basically how it works. You have high pressure oil comes in, goes into the bottom of the filter, gets filtered, goes into the filter, goes through the can, and it gets returned here, and it dumps back in through the same tube that the oil gets filled into the engine. So I can tighten that up, and then I can we'll go ahead and put the intake manifold on. Alright, I'm ready to put the intake manifold on, and I have my gaskets in place, and I have ultra copper that I'm using on both sides of the gasket, and it's a Permatex ultra copper. The reason I use this is good up to 700 degrees. The regular red silicone Permatex is only good up to 600. And if you recall, when I took the intake manifold off, this area right here was burnt out from the heat riser going up to the carburetor. So I'm using the ultra copper to make sure that the heat doesn't destroy the gasket. Now, when you put the gasket on, there's a smooth side and the raised dimple side. The raised dimple side goes up towards the intake manifold. And you simply take your intake, slide my heat riser in there, and set it in place. Now there's a variety of fasteners that go with this, so I'll put all the fasteners in, and I'll show you. There's like the clamps that go in the middle here. There's clamps, and there's a bracket for the coil, and there's a spring return clip, all that kind of stuff. So I'll put that in and show you what it looks like when it's done. Now you may have to go around a couple times, but they all go to 26 to 30 foot-pounds. And you go around in a nice pattern, eventually you get them all nice and even. Yeah, that's Shelby snoring back there. Okay, 30 foot-pounds all the way around, and what I'll do is I'll let that set a day or two, and then I'll come back to check just to make sure, because they will kind of crush the gasket, and I want to make sure they're all even and tight before I take it to the dyno. I have a little bit of my right stuff around the opening for the fuel pump, and I have my gasket on the fuel pump with some right stuff on there just to hold it in place and seal around the fuel pump. I'm going to slide my fuel pump in place, and it's going to rub against the eccentric inside, so I can just put it up there and put my bolts in. The last thing I'm going to do for this video is put the distributor in, and before I do, what I did is I put a little pencil mark on here to show where the rotor needs to be facing. If I put my rotor on here, the rotor needs to be facing right at this mark at top dead center for number 1. So what I'll do is I'll put my distributor in the way it's going to go. I have some assembly lube on the gear there. I'm just going to lower this into place. Now I don't have to rebuild this distributor because it was rebuilt recently, and a Pertronics unit was put in, so I don't have to worry about the points, that kind of ignition. So it's a kind of neat thing if you ever use the Pertronics unit. It's just hard to get that line up in there. There we go. Okay, now the mark is on the front of the distributor here. So, move this up here a little bit. So number 1 is going to be pointing over here. So what I have to do is make sure that, okay, got my rotor on there, and turn that now so that the number 1 line is right here. So when my cap goes on, now my distributor will be pointing the right way. Now the other thing is, if you look at the bottom here, you notice that it's not fully seated. It's not fully seated because it's not engaged into the oil pump in the bottom. So what I have is a really long rod here, and I'll pull this back out, and I'm going to notice what direction. Okay, so it's got to be turned that direction. Just going to lower this in there. Rotate that a little bit. Okay, now put my distributor back in. Okay, I got number 1 up front. Okay, so that's fully seated, but I'm still not at number 1 position. So I have to rotate that a little bit more. It takes a little bit of patience, so have a little patience when you do this. Now what I'm going to do is, before I take this to the dyno, I'm actually going to take this out and fill it up with oil and rotate that pump by hand anyway. But I'm just sitting this in place so I can sort of have the engine complete sitting here. Try this again. Okay, number 1 right there. Distributor's facing in the right direction, and all I have to do is put my clamp in place on the bottom, and I can just sort of leave that. Since I'm taking the distributor back out, I can sort of leave it like that. So there we go. So now everything is in place. The whole thing is all set up, ready to roll. I put my coil on up here, and that's all ready to roll. So the engine pretty much is all finished. Just some pulleys and stuff up front, but I think that's enough for now. So there you have it, guys. The engine is assembled. I just have to powder coat my valve covers and put my pulley on the front for the water pump so I can dyno test it. But all we have to do to finish the engine is rebuild the carburetor. So the next video will be rebuilding your carburetor, making sure it's ready for dyno testing. We'll put it on, and then we'll take it over and get it running. Thanks for stopping by Pete's Garage.